me tell you first who I am. Why? Because it's interesting, I think, for me personally, is I grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and moved to Boulder, Colorado, about 8 years ago. Been in Boulder now for a couple years. And for those that don't know Boulder, Boulder is sort of a really growing, thriving startup community, which is great because I like to do startups and it sort of works. I guess if I wanted to be an actor, I would have gone somewhere else. But the exciting thing is I've been doing startups since I was 9. And one of the things that I've talked about and thought about a lot as I grew, and I'll tell you the story, when I was 9, it wasn't that exciting. I sort of convinced everyone in the neighborhood that if I could get people to pay us to mow the lawns and to wash the cars, and they did the work, that I'd give them half the money, and that was a good thing, and they all really enjoyed that. So I got a lot of free meals and movies out of it, and sort of continued doing that my whole life, sort of figuring out interesting ways that communities grew and how people sort of interacted, and beyond that, sort of how people failed and how people succeeded. I did want to, because I am wearing I did want to do my Mr. Rogers move and take off my sweatshirt. Hold on one second. It's a really interesting venue. I did a talk once for a sports blogging conference called Blogs with Balls. And, oh shit, okay. And it was in a bar, and Guinness actually sponsored it. And so about halfway through, everybody was completely shit-faced, and it was awesome. Because we could say things like shit-faced, and everybody went, that's funny. But so we started, where was I? Failure, startups. One of the things that Jen asked me to talk about was the spirit of the startup. And why was somebody who sort of could have done a lot of different things, sort of chose to live this world of pain and anger, that startups are. I'm 22 and I'm bearded and fat. I'm not, I'm 39. But what is the spirit of the startup? And so I spent a lot of time thinking about that because I don't actually talk that often or think that much about the spirit of the startup. It's just kind of what I do. What I think a lot about is failure. Like, how does failure work inside of a startup? Why do startups succeed? Why do startups fail? So I went and I looked and I thought and I read and I tried to find a cute, quote or something really cool. But I did find a song, and I thought I'd try to play it. And this song, to me, is the spirit of the startup. So sorry, sound man, but we're gonna try this. And if you know the lyrics, please sing along.
So you wanna be a gangster, all that shit.
Listen to the words.
Any motherfucker don't even trip. You be hard as hell, take whatever you want. Punk suckers wanna front, they get done 'cause you a gangster. Nothing more, nothing less. Put my boy to the test.
So I'll play it again. I know it's an exciting song. Does anyone know who that person is? Anyone? Too Short. Does anyone know where Too Short got started? Oakland, you know how he got started. He recorded tapes in his bedroom, put them in the back of a car at the age of 15, wasn't even able to drive yet, took that car around and sold tapes out of the back of his car, right? That's what he did. Multi-platinum, grew. That was actually off the album Shorty is a Pimp. One of my favorite. I actually am a big Too Short fan. I actually bought tapes out of the back of his car, and I think that's kind of where I got started thinking about entrepreneurship. And there's a lot of talk about how entrepreneurs and startups are very much like the gangster game or the drug game. But if you listen to what he says in that song, it was from a movie called Juice in 1991, and in the movie Juice, it was about a kid who really wanted to make it and thought it was cool to be a gangster, right? To be, being in the hood was an awesome thing. And I grew up in the Bay Area, and I had a lot of friends that sort of lived that lifestyle very quickly because most of them didn't do much after. And the song is about, if you choose to be a gangster, it fucking sucks. You have to kill people, right? You have to do things that are horrible, and at some point, you have to sell your soul to the devil. That's being an entrepreneur. At some point, you've got to do horrible things. At some point, you've got to fire your friend. Harper talked about it earlier, right? Hiring your friend until it sucks. It's because it sucks because you have to fire them, right? At some point, being an entrepreneur is not fun. At some point, failure enters the game, right? So I started doing a lot of research and thought around failure and how failure sort of fits. And I talk about it a lot, and so I'm trying to adjust that talk where I can, but we'll see what we can do here. There's a book, if you ever want to read it, which I really, really like. It's called Born to Lose, a study of failure in America. I think it's called Born to Lose or Born Loser. I have it somewhere, I can show it to you. But the book talks about how failure in America is viewed, right? So just like gangsterism was this great, cool thing that everybody did, failure is something that in America we love. Think about it. Have you ever watched, True Hollywood Story? Right? Have you ever watched a movie? How do they all go the same way? It literally goes like this. Hey, I'm super cool. I did really good things. Oh, shit. Right? Oh, I did really cool things again. Now everybody loves me. I was actually in the airport flying here. I came here from San Francisco on a red eye, and they're interviewing Michael Caine, the actor. And he said that when he was unable to be a romantic lead, he quit being an actor. And he was down in Miami hanging out with my friend Jack Nicholson. And I hate when people say that, drop names like, I know Jen, by the way. But he's talking about how he and Jack Nicholson did this movie called Blood and Wine, which is actually a really horrible movie. It had Jennifer Lopez in it, I believe. It was really bad. But he talked about how he made this shift, right? And he talked about how what he learned was that being a romantic lead was a boring movie to be in because this is how it worked. I love that girl. She hates me. Oh, she loves me. Now it's over, right? That's being a romantic lead. And now he's able to enter into this world where he's able to do really interesting parts and really interesting plays. And that's sort of the growth of the entrepreneur. So you're a failure, right? Let's go back to failure. Failure is this world where we start off and we do something really awesome, and then we fail, and then we continue on. And in startup world, we call that the pivot. Right? We come out with this idea. I'm going to build a website where I'm going to sell comic books, and everybody and their mother is going to buy them because they fucking rock. Right? How many people here have ever read a comic book? How many people, put your hand down if you stopped reading them? You guys should go buy them. They're awesome. Right? That's the truth. Most people stop reading comic books at some point. So we went in and said, okay, well, we're not making money now selling comic books. What can we do that's different? Well, let's add community to it. Let's pivot. Let's try something different. This is the standard flow of an entrepreneur, right? This is the standard flow of a startup. You start with an idea. You don't wed yourself to the idea, right? You wed yourself to the process. And the process is a series of consistent and constant failure. That's what startups are. I start with an idea, I test the idea works or doesn't work, and then I test again and it works and doesn't work, and I test again and it works and doesn't work, and I have these series of failures, and all of a sudden, I figure out that sending a 140-character message is amazing and everybody loves it, and I double down on that. That's startups. That's failure, right? So failure isn't, we talk a lot in startups about the idea of fail fast, and you'll hear Brad Feld's coming out later, I think, with Dave Cohen, and he talks about this, and I'm gonna say he stole my thunder, but maybe I stole his. The idea of failing fast isn't work my ass off to see if the company should win or fail. It's work my ass off to see if the idea will win or fail. So don't wed yourself to the idea, right? That's one of the key tenets in startup land, right? Maybe you start off and your idea is that you want to dig ditches for old people, right? And then you realize that old people don't like to dig ditches, they prefer to have trees. So all of a sudden you start to plant trees. Then you find out that old people actually don't buy trees, young people buy trees, right? And then wow, you find out that if in December you grow trees, people seem to buy them more often. That's the path, right? There is nothing in startups where there is this massive growth, complete failure, and then growth again. It's a series of small failures. Let's think about the word really quickly. And how much time do I have, Jen? Because I know I'm boring and I want to finish. Son of a bitch. Okay, so let's think about the word here. Here's what's interesting. So the concept of failure, right? Let's talk about the concept of losing. Viscerally, how does that feel? If I say to you, let's just do this really quickly. Everybody put your hands in the air again. This time put the other hand in the air, just because I'm figuring you might be tired. If you like to be called a born loser, put your hand down. If you would prefer to be called, and I can see you guys up there, if you prefer to be called a complete failure, put your hand down. After listening to those two things, which ones do you prefer? If you prefer born loser, raise your hand. If you prefer complete failure, raise your hand. Right? Why is that? Why do we, as startup people, love the concept of being a complete failure, hate the concept of born losing? The primary difference between the two, anybody? Try and fail. What's a unfixable? Losing is an end. You can't fail a game, right? You lose a game. One of my favorite ads of all time is Michael Jordan, and he does, he's a Nike ad, and he's walking, he's like, I've missed 70,000 million shots, and I've lost this many games, and it's the best ad ever. Go look on it on YouTube. And I'm not saying that because I'm in Chicago, because I fucking hate Michael Jordan. But the ad is awesome, right? And at the end of it, he goes, and that's why I succeed. It's our failures that teach us success, and we forget that as startup people. We go and we pitch startup, we pitch VCs, we pitch angels. We hear really smart people like Travis, one of my favorite people in the world, talk about his thesis around investment and his process around Scour, and we're like, man, being sued, $250 billion, that's fucking awesome, right? We go, how do I get in front of you? And I guarantee you between the time he walked off that stage and went into the back and walked out, 7 people told him a startup idea. We die so much as entrepreneurs for love, right? We want so badly for people to believe like we do in the ideas that we have. And we spend the majority of our time being told that our ideas are stupid. It's the way the world works as a startup guy, right? Or girl, woman. Clearly I'm not married. We spend a lot of time worrying about that. So the spirit of the startup, getting back to that, and I can play more of the song if you like, and I will later. It is my favorite song. That, and by the way, Selena Gomez is number 2. Big fan of Selena Gomez. We're actually trying to work a deal with Disney where we can do a comic book with Selena Gomez, which makes me a really dirty old man, but I like it. I was going to show it to you, but we don't have it yet. The truth of the matter is that as a startup person, there's one person that we believe in more than anybody, and that's ourselves. And the key to becoming a great startup person, where the spirit of startups become, and this is what you do for the rest of your life, and you catch that evil, horrible disease. I was a drug addict for 5 years, and I almost would rather be a drug addict than a startup guy at this point. But the horrible disease of a startup is that you stand in a room full of people like this. There's 100, 200 people here. And you want to scream to the rafters, I have the best idea in the world and nobody else has ever thought about it. And I'm going to tell you all, and you all are going to come and shake my hand because you love the fact that this is this idea. And in fact, you're not even going to shake my hand. In your other hand, you're going to have $10 to give me because you want to be part of this idea. That's how awesome it is. And then you do it and you go, hey, I'm selling comic books online. The entire room goes, I don't give a shit. And what you do is you go, you're all idiots. That's a startup guy. And it's not that we don't listen, right? Startup people listen. And that's one of the great things of a startup person. If you think about Ev Williams when he did Odeo, right? There's a great story of sort of how they figured out Twitter. And they sort of were going along with Odeo, and they got through it for a little while and then realized, hey, this isn't working, right? This isn't going anywhere. Podcasting dead. We don't know what we're going to do. Ev's like, well, we can keep going along for a while. I just made a bunch of money from Google, but let's really try to figure out what we need to do. They laid off Friends, right? Back to being the evil startup guy. They laid off Friends, and then they said, let's do a hackathon. Let's set up groups. And everybody at Odeo, all the devs, let's get together and let's pitch ideas. And one of the devs, Jack Dorsey, said, I got this really cool idea where it's like an SMS thing, and you can SMS that you're on the pot and everybody will know that you're taking a dump, and it's just awesome, right? And everybody goes, dump, awesome, let's do that. And that's literally how Twitter started, although I think the dump part I added. But the reality was that they literally said, hey team, we don't know what we can do to be successful. I believe in you guys. And then they did what a startup does. We failed. Let's take a look at something else. Let's try that. And if that fails, then we'll try something else. And they shrunk the team, by the way. I think they went down to 3 people. And they stayed at 3 people until they built it and started to get some traction. And they started to get some traction. And by the way, the last one they were talking about names, the original name was TWTTR. And I was a consultant when they first came out. I had sold my company and I was consulting, and I was getting paid 10 grand a month, which I thought was a lot of money because I would never pay 10 grand for me. And I was sitting down with this this CEO, a guy that started MapQuest and Jab, I mean, just top-notch dude, Perry, great guy. And I'm like, there's this thing, it's called Presence I Am. It's the most amazing thing ever. You should totally check it out. It's called Twatter. And he went, and he looked, and yes, it was a male porn site. It was awesome. He didn't let me take him to dinner that night either. It was sort of sucked. But anyway, but that's how it worked. And I actually had a phone call. You'll hear Tony Conrad later, right? Tony's an amazing dude. And I called him when we were in the process of raising money for Graphically. And he's like, how big are you? And I'm like, we're like 15 people now, maybe 16 people. Feels big, but it feels like every time we need something, we kind of hire somebody, and that's kind of how it is. And he goes, well, how much are you burning? And I'm like, well, clearly a lot because I'm calling you looking for money. And he goes, fire people. Take your burn down. Figure out how to do it for a third of what you're currently spending. Cut the staff by 2/3 and see what you can do. So we cut staff. And I didn't do it because Tony told me to. I sat down and thought about it and said, we're not being successful with who we have. We have the wrong people to do what we want to do. And the buy-in, everybody bought into the new vision. Everybody got it. Our current investors got it. Everybody got it. But we weren't going to get to where we needed to go with who we had. So we let go 7 people. Some of those people were my friends. Like 2 of them I didn't like, so I was okay with that. But I'm kidding. We liked them all, sort of. But it was really hard. And it's funny, like yesterday I was in Mountain View, and I feel like I'm name dropping all over the place. I was at this thing in Microsoft. They do this BizSpark thing, and I was there. And they had a panel of entrepreneurs, and Loic from Seismic was there, and Wendy from Get Satisfaction, who are both awesome people. And Loic was talking about at Seismic, they did that. You know, they started off, does anyone remember what Seismic was when it started? Yeah, it was video Twitter, right? And of course, everybody in the room, great example, right? Everybody in the room's like, that was stupid, right? But they got funded, they started a company, people believed it, they were users, right? And they switched from that, and now they're monitoring social media, right? They're competing with TweetDeck. I mean, how do you go from being video, Twitter, to being TweetDeck? I don't get it, but they're doing well. But he talked about how when he had to lay off staff, he let go 2/3 of his staff. He did a video and posted to YouTube, right? Forced transparency. Again, the story that America loves. He failed, ha ha ha, but we totally believe in him now, right? Because he shared his failure. So it goes back to that. I'm rambling now. Other fun things. Maybe I should do another musical interlude. Want another one, a song? Let's find another song. Anyone have any suggestions? Do you know that there's bands that play here? Should I just sing? So yesterday I'm at this thing at Microsoft. I'm not singing. You can all kiss my ass. I'm at this thing at Microsoft yesterday, and one of our investors is we're DFJ Mercury, right? And they do investment in Chicago all the way down through Texas and Colorado. But we also have Tim Draper, DFJ, and Tim Draper's there. And Tim Draper actually sung a song about entrepreneurship, and I wish I had recorded it because I totally would have made you guys sing it. It would have been awesome. I'm going to skip the song. Oh, really? No, I want to play a song. I'm kidding. Any questions? Thank you. Yeah. They suck. You suck. I hate you. What? Huh? I'd be happy to talk about BizSpark afterwards, if nobody has any questions. I don't want to be pitchy, not to be dicky. Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing what you just said more about forced transparency, because you just mentioned about putting on YouTube, and some companies have had good success with that and showcasing their fails, but others get mashups and then it becomes viral and then it becomes out of their control. And then legal says, well, now you've got other people involved. So how do you establish that balance between transparent and also protecting other people?
Yeah. So no, I think this is actually a conversation that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about. I actually think that transparency is dying. I think that the concept of transparency is something that's become overblown and that we've overdone it. And I think that what will happen is you'll start to see a restriction back to truth rather than transparency. Transparency is, let me take off my clothes and show you how naked I am, right? Truth is like, it's a one-to-one relationship. And I think that that is where we're going. I think that you should be as open as you want to be. And it should be no different than you are as a person. And if you're a startup with less than 10 people, then you're all about the CEO, right? If you're living social and you have, how many guys do you have now, Aaron? A lot. So Aaron has a lot, which I assume means more than 10. You can't be the CEO transparency guy anymore. Because now you're hurting people. Like you're literally hurting people because you're saying things that are hurting somebody, hurting their livelihood or hurting, so there's a time period where it shifts. I think what doesn't change in there is this concept of truth. I think that there's a way to be truthful about you and your organization that isn't necessarily about being open and transparent consistently and constantly. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, hands in the air. I just want to make you do it. Thank you.